is up, everybody? Welcome to the MMA Engine and welcome to Probability. We have UFC Vegas 70, Nikita Krylov going against Ryan Spann. 13 fights to talk about. A lot of violence sticking out on this card, and I'll say it's a big giant step up from last week's card. I think this card is going to be very fun, like pretty much every single matchup. So yeah, no complaints from me this week, and looking forward to some fights, looking forward to talking some props. As always, we're here with Uncle WEEZY. WEEZY, what is up? You looking forward to UFC Vegas 70?
I am. I think it's a really fun card from a fan perspective, and there are some interesting angles already starting to peek their heads out from me as I finish up taping this card. Can't wait to talk about it. But, the books have done a pretty decent job getting most of these lines out today. Thank you to Bet Online, always being first to market in terms of, being able to open these things up and get some good bets out there. So they've opened up most of these markets already, but the ones that haven't will use the 5 dimes lines that are available.
Yeah, for sure. Looking forward to this card, man. Any fights really sticking out to you that you're looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of them in particular. That Malott Lioness fight is going to be really fun. I want to see what this Narulo Aliev has got for us here, a 22-year-old prospect from Tajikistan who is known as the Tajik Eagle because he fights like Habib the Eagle Nurmagomedov, and he even kind of looks like him too, fights in the same weight class. That's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to Gabriela Fernandez's debut. I'm really looking forward to the Ghost Pepper versus Trevor Peek. That one's going to be such a fun fight. And then from there, we're going towards that main card where the fights get even higher level. So I think that this is an underrated card, both from a betting and from a stylistic and fan perspective here. So I'm looking forward to breaking it down.
One thing I'm looking forward to, WEEZY, is we don't have Jordan Wright, Zach Palga in the co-main event this week.
We do not. We do not. We don't have William Knight on a main card. Really just stinking out the place, having one of the worst performances I've ever seen in my life. Obviously, the man does not deserve death threats for that performance, which is just absolutely so Bush League, so stupid. Whoever's doing that, just stop. Get a life. Get out from behind your keyboard and enjoy life every once in a while. But really, that was a stench performance from top to bottom. And while I would never, ever contact him or, say anything to him personally about it, that was just terrible.
Yeah. I echo all your sentiments there, WEEZY. All right. I do want to shout out the chat before we get started. If you guys can please leave a like, subscribe here to the MMA Engine. Me and WEEZY do go live every Monday, 5:15, 5:30 Eastern time to break down some props for the upcoming card. We got Propaholic, first one in here, saying he's on some overs this week. Don't like to hear that. I had my first over this year last week. Almost hit, but shout out to Lena Landsberg for going into the guard of Mauro Bueno Silva. That was fun. We got Victor in the chat. We got Herc. We got Tommy Unders. We got Jared. We have Zoo Peak Music in the chat. What is up? What is up? We got Daz in the chat. What's up, Daz? What is up, everybody? All right. I say we get into it, WEEZY, and let us start with the first fight of the card. What do you want to start with? You want to start with the
Yeah, it's right now. It's the Selecki versus Deaton fight is what I'm showing on UFC stat. I think I have this in UFC stats order. Let me just look here real quick on the card. Yeah, they got Selecki Deaton starting off the card, so that's what we'll do.
All right, let's start with that. So we got Joe Selecki going against Carl Deaton. We got Selecki as a really big favorite here. We got the fight goes to decision plus 150. The fight doesn't go to decision minus 180. We have the over-under. Looks like they have the over 1.5 minus 150, under 1.5 plus 120, the over 2.5 plus 120, the under 2.5 minus 150. Yeah, I would definitely lean violence here. I would definitely lean towards Selecki inside the distance. I'm curious to see if they get out a Selecki inside the distance bet at plus money here. It looks like it's minus 105 there on 5 dimes. But yeah, I strongly lean towards Selecki getting this fight down to the mat and getting the submission. I don't think Deaton has great takedown defense. I've seen him put in some bad spots, and Selecki is a legit BJJ black belt. Deaton coming in on short notice as well. On top of that, WEEZY, just an atrocious haircut, just a terrible excuse for a haircut. So I like Selecki inside the distance. I don't know. I don't see Deaton really finishing Selecki. I think it had to be by knockout, and I don't think Deaton has like some murderous power puncher. So I do lean towards Selecki getting it done. But in terms of the props, WEEZY, anything sticking out here? I know we don't have much of a sample for this Deaton guy.
Yeah, we got samples, for 21 fights that have been scheduled for 3 rounds. If we look down here, Brady, see we've got the violence betting lines, the divisional violence benchmarks, we got the UFC totals here, but on the very bottom, we've got the outside the UFC totals, so we can see what Deaton's done. 14 of 21 of his fights have finished inside the distance. 14 of 21 under 2.5. 14 of 21 haven't even started round 3. And then it's 11 of 21 under 1.5 and 10 of 21 under fight doesn't start round 2. So, and what did you say that the under 1.5 and the over 1.5 were listed at right now? I didn't have those at open.
Yeah, so the under 1.5 is plus 120.
Okay.
And then the over 1.5 is minus 150.
Minus 150. Okay. So we can see here that the books are trying to get us to bet on those overs because they are underpricing these lines according to the benchmark between 7 and 8% here, while we see on the other side that we're getting overpricings for the violence lines between 12 and 14%. So these lines have got about 5% of vig in them, which is about what we'd expect. Early in the week, at least, it might come down to 4 or 3, as we go later on in the week. But here, I've just got to take a longer look at Carl Deaton here. But with this kid Deaton taking the fight on short notice, if you're seeing him getting taken down and put in bad spots on the ground, that's why Joe Selecki's a minus 600 favorite here. If you're going to be at any kind of a grappling deficiency against Joe Selecki, that's going to make the fight easy for him. Joe Selecki's only UFC finish came in the first round versus Austin Hubbard. So maybe what you do here if you're playing violence is look for that plus money on the under 1.5 because it's priced fairly according, in terms of the benchmark, it's the cheapest line in the comparison that we have between the implied probability of the 1.5 to 2.5, the fight doesn't go to decision, compared to those benchmarks respectively. This is the one that's priced best, and this is the one that's overpriced the least according to the UFC standards, but and it's actually doing better according to the outside the UFC bets as well. So under 1.5 at plus 120 is probably how I would play this. I'd look for Selecki to get an early finish here.
Yeah, I think he makes it look quite easy. I mean, Selecki almost finished, it was, I think, De Silva in his last fight. He got really close to finishing De Silva in that second round, had multiple chokes, and some of those chokes were deep as well. I don't think Deaton on short notice with that hair, unless that haircut's going to help him get out of those subs.
I don't think that haircut's going to help him do anything but get locked up. Yeah. Or dumped by his wife or whatever, if he's got a girlfriend, I don't know. But that haircut, I mean, we cap haircuts here on the MMA Engine, on our respective channels, on Pub Sports Radio even, Brady. And that one is about as bad as it gets. I mean, him and Charles Johnson and Jose Johnson all on the same card. We're in a little bit of trouble here today.
Absolutely. By the way, Punchless is calling me Philippe Lins, which I don't mind it. I've been called Jake Collier. I've been called Carlos Felipe, and now I've been called Philippe Lins. I think that the best one thus far is Philippe Lins after that, especially after that knockout win.
Yeah, dude, I agree. He's got a beautiful head of hair on him, too, just like you, Brady. Lins does, and he's looked a lot more purposeful in these last 2 fights against Pacquiao and then against OSP with a total ass shaving. Congratulations to anybody who had Felipe Lins in their DraftKings lineup because I think he put up like 134 points.
Yep, and Jared's saying Jake Collier is foul. It was foul, but it motivated me to lose 100 pounds. So I appreciate everybody calling me Jake Collier. I could not have done it without you all. Appreciate that a ton. All right, WEEZY, let's move on to the next fight on the card. And we have a very good one. We have Jose Johnson going against Garrett Armfield. We got the over-under we got 1.5 and 2.5. So the over 1.5 is minus 180. The under 1.5 is plus 150. The over 2.5 is plus 100. The under 2.5 is minus 130. The fight goes decision plus 130. The fight doesn't go decision is minus 160. Yeah, I got them taping this fight today, WEEZY. I think both guys have paths to finish. I mean, I went back and watched Jose Johnson's tape. How does this dude have so much freaking power? Like, this guy's like a skinny guy, And he's looking like Francis Ngannou with some of the shots he's landing. Like you said last night, he's almost killing guys. Like some of these guys are getting knocked down and just having like seizures and they're not getting up. I mean, this guy's power is no joke. On the flip side, Armfield, he has some submissions on his record. He has some power as well. He's finished all but one of his wins. So I think both guys are super dangerous, and both guys have been finished. These guys have been finished. Johnson finished 4 times, 3 by sub, and then Armfield finished in 2 of his 3 losses. So I would lean under here. I would lean violence. Anything sticking out in these numbers, WEEZY?
It's hard with these types of fights because we've got one combined UFC fight because we're not counting these contender series fights right now. So the contender series fights are getting put down here in the fighter under totals and the over totals for total fights. But as we can see here, we're getting advantages. There's a lot of green down in this area right here, which is the outside the UFC totals, which is where we have all the sample size, right? 29 total fights. 65% of them finishing inside the distance compared to a 61% implied probability here. 62% go under 2.5 rounds compared to the 56% of the line. And we've got 58% down here compared to 40% of the line. So we see that, the drop off from under 2.5 to under 1.5 in performance is very low. It's only 4% overall. You see that right there, Brady? Yeah. But the drop-off in line price is 16%. And that's kind of what we want to do here. We want to let the data guide us to the cheaply priced lines. And then what we want to do is look at the stylistic matchup from there and determine whether we think that this fight's going to go over or under. And here's the thing. I mean, this guy Johnson, like you said, he looks like he hits dudes and it looks like they got electrocuted. I mean, it's crazy, dude. Like with the sound that elbow made when he knocked out McIntosh it sounded like a hammer hitting a coconut, man. And like you said, where does the fucking power come from? This guy looks like Christian Bale in The Machinist. He's skinny as a rail. I mean, I don't know what the hell is going on. Where does the power come from? Because it must be like pointy elbows and like small fists that when you get hit by a bullet, it goes through you. When you get hit by a wrecking ball, it just takes you with it. You know what I'm saying? So I think that he's really sharp and lean. Maybe that translates the power for him here somehow. But Johnson doesn't have much of a get-up game from the ground, but he will go for submissions as well because he's so long and because he's so huge for the weight class. How often do you see 6-foot bantamweights? You just don't see those walking around every day. So I'm leaning violence here. Obviously, they're trying to overprice it, but when you look at what the template's trying to tell us here, it's trying to tell us that the under 1.5 is probably the best way to play this because that's where most of their finishes are coming, and that's where the biggest break is in terms of when we're comparing those performances outside the UFC to the implied probability of the line. That's where the savings is on the under 1.5.
All right, I'm curious to see where Bet Online opens up their. Oh, it's going to be 2.5. They're going to open it up under, but I'm curious to see where Bet Online opens up that under 2.5. Hopefully in the very near future, I'll be looking at that. I'll also be looking at the fight doesn't go depending on where they open it as well. But yeah, I do have violence circled for that one there. All right, let us move on to the next fight. We have an interesting one here. We have Nurullo Aliev going against Rafael Alves. We got the over-under set at 2.5 rounds, the over 2.5 minus 115, the under 2.5 rounds minus 115. The fight goes to decision plus 100. The fight doesn't go to decision minus 130. And yeah, I thought I'd be a little bit sneaky here, getting maybe a plus money fight doesn't go because Aliev, he's not much of a finisher. I think he only has like a 20% finish rate, but Rafael Alves is one of those just kill or be killed fighters. Alves has been finished a massive, I think it's like 9 times. 9 times he's been finished. The only time he was not finished was against Damir Ismagulov, who doesn't really finish anybody. And then on top of that, Alves is extremely dangerous, whether it's on the feet. He has a ton of power. He's very explosive. He goes after it early. And then on top of that, he has a really good submission game as well. So I feel like Alves is going to be very live early to either land a big shot, maybe catch Aliev in a submission. And as this fight goes on, we do see Alves slow down as the fight goes on. I like the ground and pound of Aliev. He's not somebody that goes down there and just lays on you. He's really active with it, and he cuts guys open. So I'm leading the fight doesn't go, but it looks like they're kind of all over it. I was hoping for some plus money there, but it looks like money's coming in on this violence, WEEZY. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, my thought is that it probably goes over. Aliev, I think, is going to be the guy who kind of controls the pace of this fight, right? Because you can watch the tape on Rafael Alves and get a pretty good idea of who this guy is as a fighter. He's extremely athletic. He's extremely explosive, very powerful. And when he goes for submissions, 80% to 90% of the time, it's going to be the guillotine. And he's going to go for it, whether it serves him to be on his back or not. So he's kind of a predictable fighter. And in another case, so is Aliev, as Aliev is going to try to get takedowns and control you on the ground. But the problem is that while Aliev does have some very nice trips when he gets in there in the clinch, some really nice cheeky trips that he's gotten on the regional scene, he does shoot a lot of double legs. And if he shoots double legs against Alves, he's going to wind up in that guillotine 2-3 times during the course of this fight. And Aliev might be close to getting it. Alves might be close to getting it. And I've seen Aliev in a pretty deep triangle choke before. It didn't look like he panicked at all. He stayed in there for about a minute and a half and defended well and didn't look at any point like he was close to tapping or giving up. So it's an interesting stylistic matchup to me here. But I think if Aliev's fights smart, and we've seen him do that on the regional scene over and over and over again, that he's just going to try to control as many minutes of this fight on the ground as he can. He's working on that guillotine defense as we speak. And if he isn't, he's got some of the worst coaches that don't know how to watch tape that there could be possibly in the world. So I am leaning towards the over here, but I think the better way to play this fight is if you're on that Aliev side, that Aliev round 3 decision or just by decision. And if you're on that Alves side, just pick him to win inside the distance because he's so explosive, but he's such a shitty minute winner. He doesn't throw any volume. He very rarely gets takedowns of his own. And he's so willing to jump for that guillotine that if he doesn't get the guillotine, he's just going to give up a ton of minutes in control time on the bottom as well. So I think the better way to play this, rather than playing the time props, is to play either Aliev by decision or Rafael Alves inside the distance.
Yeah, I mean, I could see. I was thinking maybe like the Aliev decision only if they completely mess it up. Like if they put it at like minus or 200 or around his money line, I might smash that Aliev decision only because I don't see Alves winning a decision here. I'd be shocked. I don't even know what an Alves decision looks like in this one. Probably going to stay away from the time props unless BetOnline opens up like an under at plus money. I will be taking that, but doesn't look like I'm getting it. So probably one I'll be passing on, WEEZY. All right.
I agree, dude. I agree. I think it's a great pass from a time prop perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let us move on to the next one. We have Jazz Divicius.
Let's go to Haley Cowan versus Aylin Perez because I think you skipped over that one.
Okay. What if I skipped over it for a reason? No. Okay, here we go. Haley Cowan going against Aylin Perez. We got Cowan is the favorite here. Perez the dog. We got the over-under set at, we got 1.5 and 2.5. We'll talk about the 2.5. The 2.5, we have minus 185 to the over and then plus 155 to the under. The fight goes to decision. Minus 160. The fight doesn't go to decision. Plus 130. Interesting. Thoughts on this one, WEEZY?
Yeah, I kind of did a deep dive on both of these ladies here. Haley Cowan does good work from distance because she's so athletic and tall for the division. Got great kicks from a distance, and so does Aylin Perez does her best work in close, in the clinch, and in top position. So it's going to depend on which one of these ladies is stronger. I have a feeling it's going to be Haley Cowan that's stronger here, and Haley does her best job kind of winning minutes in the clinch. She's not finishing Aylin Perez. And I think Aylin Perez could potentially finish Haley Cowan if she gets on top and shows the ability to be able to fend off submissions and land really heavy ground and pound. But I kind of like the fight goes to decision here. For women's bantamweight fights, they're going to decision 63.5% of the time. They're going over 2.5 rounds almost 70% of the time. And when we see where these things are priced, usually, Brady, for women's fights, especially when we don't have much of a sample size, it's going to lean towards that over, because people tend to bet overs in women's fights. But here in the overs, we're actually underpriced according to the benchmark, and we're overpriced according to the benchmark on the violence props here. But I don't see finishing ability in Haley Cowan here. And for Ailin Perez, we've still got to call these fights step ups for her in relation to the ladies that she was fighting on the regional scene. So I think fight goes to decision at -160, over 2.5, and -185 would be the way that I would play these.
Yeah, I haven't looked much into this fight yet, but I do see that they've lost all their fights inside the distance, all three of them by subs. So you don't see a submission from either side here?
I mean, like, when is Haley Cowan getting subs and when is Ailin Perez getting subs? That would be the question. So let's look at that. How many of these wins are by knockout and by submission for each of these ladies? So for Haley Cowan, I've got a 28% submission rate, and for Ailin Perez, it's 14%. So 1 win by submission for Ailin Perez, 2 wins by submission for Haley Cowan. And Haley Cowan's last win by submission came against Monica Franco. I don't know if Monica Franco is any good. And we see that Ailin Perez here in her most recent fights is knocking these girls out, but not submitting them. And, so I'm just assuming that sub came early in her career. And Ailin Perez has been subbed, but it was by Stephanie Egger. And Haley Cowan has been subbed in both of her losses. So since these ladies are generally knockout more than, especially in Perez's case, than they are sub, and neither one of these ladies is like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, I'm thinking probably over here, but not running to the window on either side here on the time props.
Yeah, I mean, they're only -160 for the fight goes. That seems a little weird to me.
Underpriced according to the benchmark, but we're missing a little bit of information, aren't we? Haley Cowan making her debut, Ailin Perez fight number 2. We've got to maybe see a little bit more from these ladies at this level.
Absolutely. All right. Now we'll move on to the Divicius fight. She has taken on Gabriel Fernandez. We got the over-under set at 2.5 rounds, the over 2.5 -225, the under 2.5 +175. The fight goes to decision -230. The fight doesn't go to decision +190 on Bet Online. They just came out with these props a second ago, I think. But yeah, I think this probably goes to decision -230. Seems about right. Weez, anything sticking out here?
Yeah, it's the fight goes that's overpriced here. For Divicius Fernandez, let's look for a second here. I want to see if Jasmine has ever been finished. I don't believe Jasmine's ever been finished.
She hasn't.
No, and neither has Gabriella. And that's in 3 combined losses, 18 combined pro fights. Both of these ladies have good finish records on the regional scene. 75% for Gabriella Fernandez. 3 out of 7 wins for Divicius. But we don't really have a UFC sample size. Both of Jasmine's fights have went to decision. Let me see here. I mean, we see some green over here. 50% of their combined outside the UFC fights have finished inside the distance, and we're only getting a 35% line here. But you would always expect these ladies to finish at a higher rate on the regional scene than they would at the UFC level. I could see here's what I would do. I think if there's a finish in this fight, it's going to be Fernandez, because Fernandez has got nasty power on the feet. This is a southpaw versus orthodox matchup, and Fernandez, because she's the southpaw, she gets to take advantage of those heavy body kicks that can touch your liver, while it's much more difficult for Jasmine to do that, in that stance. So I think that maybe Fernandez finish only because she's got serious power on the feet. I don't see Divicius submitting anybody. She's a good minute winner and top control artist with her clinch game and with her takedowns and with her wrestling. But on the feet, she's bad. She's bad, dude. The numbers for Jasmine Divicius, if you look at the distance striking numbers, she lands 3.03 per minute and she absorbs over 7. So she is absolutely getting hammered on the feet. And guess what? This is against Natalia Silva, Kay Hansen, who are both 3 inches shorter than her. In Kay Hansen's case, 5 inches shorter, 5-inch reach disadvantage. And Kay Hansen was piecing her up at range. Julia Poastri, we don't even have those stats because that was a DWCS fight. Julia outlanded her at distance almost 2-1 as well. So I like Gabriela Fernandez potentially by knockout here. But in terms of the time props, I think they're fairly priced here. I think we should be overpriced going to the fight goes to decision, but fight doesn't go at plus 190. Might be a decent look. It's 6% underpriced according to the benchmark for the division, which is 40%. We have a debuting fighter, so there could be, some nerves. There could be an adrenaline dump here. And it's going to be an interesting fight, but I think that I would lean personally towards that fight doesn't go side just because we don't really know that much about Fernandez yet, and we probably need to see her at this level. So a smaller bet on the plus money number might be the way to go here.
Yeah, for me, it's a big giant pass. And by the way, the Fernandez finish only is minus 200.
Wow, and we see this, so they agree with me there because this is a much closer line fight on the money line.
Yep, and I agree with you as well. All right. Let us move on to the next fight. We have a very good one. We have Trevor Peek going against Eric Gonzalez. We have the over-under set at 1.5 rounds. This is on 5 dimes. The over 1.5 minus 105. The under 1.5 minus 125. The fight goes to decision. This is on Bet Online plus 300, and the fight doesn't go decision minus 400. Probably the most violent fight, or second most violent fight on the card, WEEZY, but they're all over it there with that minus 400 price tag.
Yeah, Trevor Peek, all 7 of his professional fights have finished inside the distance that have been scheduled for 3 rounds. And for Gonzalez, it's 12 of 16, so combined 82.6% of their fights have finished inside the distance. And we're seeing an 80% implied probability on the line, so that makes sense. And in addition to that, Gonzalez in the UFC, both of his fights have finished inside the distance, and both of them have finished under 1.5 rounds. And then when you look at this fight, Trevor Peek, this guy's a madman, and Gonzalez he's got some very unorthodox striking, and he's got good power in that unorthodox striking because he hits you from odd angles and he has an odd cadence to the way that he throws strikes. So he can catch you with some stuff that you're not necessarily going to see coming sometimes. Or it comes at you in a way that you're just not really expecting. I like this fight, from a fan perspective. Fight doesn't go to decision at minus 400. I mean, it's a great parlay piece, but I really do believe that the under 1.5 at minus 125, I'd rather lay 1.25 units to win 1 than 4 units to win 1, especially when we know that these guys' best case anyway is the under 1.5 rounds, as we see that 12 of their 23 fights on the regional scene have finished under 1.5 rounds. And 6 of the 7 for Peek haven't started round 3. So I think at minus 125, even though it's overpriced by 22.5% according to the divisional benchmark, the fight doesn't go to decision is overpriced by 29.46% according to the divisional benchmark for fight doesn't go to decision. So this is cheaper here. And even though the analytics for their overall experience have better numbers for the fight doesn't go to decision, you're laying over 3 times as much money to win that 1 unit. So I think it's just smarter to play the minus 125 here.
Yep, I will be looking at that under 1.5, and then I also will be maybe looking at a potential parlay piece, or that as a parlay piece. The minus 400 fight doesn't go to decision, which I think it might be better on some books. It looks like 5 dimes has minus 350. We'll have to see where FanDuel and DraftKings get them out at, but yeah, I think violence is definitely the way to go here. Though I would not be playing in an over in a Trevor Peek fight anytime soon.
Yeah, even if you cash the bet, you're probably going to the hospital with anxiety, so it won't be worth it.
No, it won't be worth all the medical bills you have to pay after going to the hospital.
Nope, not at all, man. This is such a fun fight, though. I can't wait for this one.
Absolutely. Banger of a fight. All right. Move on to the next fight here. We have a flyweight fight. We have Ode Osborne going against the short notice Charles Johnson. We got Charles Johnson. We got the over under set at 2.5 rounds, the over 2.5 plus 120, the under 2.5 minus 150. The fight goes decision plus 160. The fight doesn't get decision minus 195. And that kind of shocks me, to be honest. I know Johnson's last fight did finish against Flick, but I mean that's Jimmy Flick, right? And typically I like betting unders in Ode Osborne fights. I think I've done it in all his fights, but I don't know. Charles Johnson is just next level durable. Not the best finisher in the world, and at minus 195, I just can't quite get there. Weezy, what's sticking out on this one?
What did you say the under 1.5 was priced at? Do you have that available?
Plus 125.
125. Okay. Got it. Yeah, I was talking with this one earlier with Propaholic about this one, and he's on the overs here. And stylistically, I absolutely get that, because Charles Johnson's very durable, very difficult to knock out, and he's a slow starter. So I could see him taking a minute to get ready to get going here, and he's not like a one-punch power guy either. And Ode Osborne's going to be a lot more well-rounded in terms of being able to handle what Charles has on the feet because he's Charles' size. Those guys are very similar in size. They're both very big flyweights. So stylistically, I like these overs. And check it out, Brady. Look at how underpriced these overs are compared to the benchmarks for the division. We're getting 38% for the fight goes at plus 160, but 57% of flyweight fights are finishing inside the distance, which is really kind of strange because, 57% are going to decision because 33% of these guys have went to decision so far. But Ode Osborne, 1 of 6, Charles Johnson, 2 of 3, right? So Charles Johnson is half this fight, but he's only 1/3 of the data. So if these guys had the same amount of fights here, I think you'd see this number closer to 45% instead of 33% because of Charles Johnson being in this fight. And Charles Johnson, we can see how many fights he's had in his career outside the UFC that have finished in round 1 or under 1.5 rounds. And that's 5 out of 10 for under 1.5. But only 3 out of 10 for the fight doesn't start round 2. So Ode Osborne's fights are definitely a lot more violent. But Charles Johnson takes a little bit to get going. So I could see the over 1.5 here. While it's the least underpriced according to the benchmark here, I think that if you want to really get randy here, I think the plus 160 for the fight goes is probably the best way to go because we see a positive 18 here, a -5 here, and a -23 here. But that would be -10%. But if we do over here, you're looking at like -16%. No, -26%. And over here, it's even more than that. So I think that fight goes at plus 160 is an interesting way to play this if you don't think that Charles Johnson is really a finisher at this level. But Ode Osborne has been finished in a lot of his losses, so you'd have to worry about his durability here. But I see this one going over. But the sample size of 9 fights that we have at the UFC level is telling us that the value, if you would rather concentrate more on past performance than the benchmark, it likes the violence betting lines. But if you think that the stylistic matchup here, think that makes this fight go over, you're going to see some very cheaply priced lines here according to the benchmarks for you to bet on, and know that you're getting them much cheaper than you normally would for an average flyweight fight.
Yep, I definitely lean that over plus 120, and then maybe even if this fight goes, maybe the over 1.5. But yeah, I think I might be taking an over in this fight as well. I hate overs, but this one makes a lot of sense to me. Lou has a question in the chat. He's saying, "Isn't Ode on short notice here as well?" I don't think so. Do you know?
No, it's Charles Johnson that's on short notice, I believe. Let's have a look on Tapology though.
Because I think
Johnson took took the fight. I think he took it on short notice. Ode Osborne was supposed to fight that fraud Dennis Bondar. So he was training for a grappling match, and now he's going to be fighting a striker in Charles Johnson. So it's Charles Johnson who's taking the fight on short notice.
All right. Let's move on to the next fight. We have one I'm very sad about, and I'll tell you why I'm sad. But we have the Jordan Levitt Victor Martinez fight. So this is why I'm upset. I woke up at like 6 o'clock this morning, checked to see if these props were out. They were not. Went back to bed. I woke up at like 10 or 11, and they were out, since like 8 in the morning. Like, what a weird time to drop some of these props. But they did, and they dropped the under 2.5 rounds in this fight at plus 165. That shortly went to plus 130, to plus 120, to minus 105, to minus 125, to minus 155, and it's been there ever since. So yeah, that line got crushed, and it continued to get crushed all the way to minus 155. I was definitely leaning violence, striker versus grappler matchup, but my goodness, would have loved anywhere near the plus 165 there. The fight doesn't go minus 180. The fight goes plus 150. WEEZY, what's sticking out here on this one?
180 and plus 150 for the fight goes. So Levitt Martinez, I see a striker versus grappler matchup here. I see Jordan Levitt finishing the majority of his fights, basically all of them by submission. The one knockout coming on a slam on a takedown. So, and then you've got Victor Martinez getting almost all of his wins by knockout. So I kind of feel like whether this fight goes to the ground or whether it's on the feet, it's going to be stylistically the kind of matchup we look for violence in. But all of a sudden now, these lines I'd say they're fairly priced where they're at, right? Jordan Levitt's fights have went under 2.5 and not to decision 3 out of 5 times, so 60%. And we're seeing a 60% number here on the under 2.5 and a little bit over a 64% number on the implied probability of the fight doesn't go to decision. They're overpriced by about 14% apiece, according to the benchmark. I think this isn't a short notice fight for either fighter. I think these guys were booked to fight each other from the word go, so they're both preparing for this fight. And oh shit, you know what? Let me bring up this. So this is my Excel spreadsheet version of this fight, and we can see here that I've actually got the Jordan Levitt, the Victor Martinez numbers in here. For some reason, they didn't load into the other spreadsheet. So when we look at these violence numbers here, we see that 68% of their fights outside the UFC have finished inside the distance, 63% under 2.5 rounds. And the stylistic components here lead me to believe that that this one will finish inside the distance because it's a striker versus grappler matchup, and I don't like how Jordan Levitt reacts to shots on the feet. And I have to look into Victor Martinez more, but he's been submitted 2 times in 4 of his pro losses, so that's a clear inside the distance option there for Jordan Levitt. I'll be interested to see where the under 1.5 does open up, because we can see that 50% of their fights have finished under 1.5, while only 63% have finished under 2.5. And there's about a 13% difference here between those two benchmarks. So maybe they'll screw this up and have it underpriced. But yeah, I mean, I do like violence here. And I think the under 2.5 at minus 155 is not a bad look.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pass unless I can get a little bit of a better line there. Looks like minus 140 there on 5 dimes. Curious to see where everybody else gets it out at. But yeah, minus 155. I don't know. That's just laying a lot of chalk for a Jordan Levitt fight, which is always terrifying. But violence definitely makes a ton of sense here.
It does. It does. Like those striker versus grappler matchups. And then you got the debut of Martinez, a potential amount of nerves there for him, an adrenaline dump. And, he's going to be much better on the feet, too. So, interesting fight.
Yep, for sure. All right, let's move on to the next fight. We have Johan Lioness going against Malott. Mike Malott, we got the over-under set at 1.5 rounds, the over 1.5 minus 126, the under 1.5 minus 104. The fight goes to decision plus 175. The fight doesn't go decision minus 215. So for some reason, BetOnline opened up the over-under at 2.5 rounds. That line got completely smashed all the way down to like minus 275. They pull it off, put it at 1.5, and they set it at plus 125 to the under. Me and you did hop on that, Weezy. Thank you for the call earlier. I appreciate that. And then it has now moved to minus 104. But 5 Dimes still has that sitting there at plus 120. I like violence here, Weezy. I think both guys are very dangerous. Obviously, Johan Lioness has a ton of power on the feet. We've seen Malott get knocked out before. Malott has a ton of power on the feet as well. And then Malott also has a very, very good submission game also. So, yeah, I like violence here. I think this fight does finish under 1.5 rounds. Weezy, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I bet the under 1.5 rounds at plus 125 for 1 unit. And that's because, if we look at outside the UFC, Malott, 7 of 8 fights finishing under 1.5 rounds. And for Lioness, it's 5.7. So that's 80% of their combined pro fights have finished under 1.5 rounds. And we got an implied probability of, like 45% there or something like that. So that was just way too good to pass up. In addition to that, Mike Malott, over his 10-fight career as a professional, has an average fight time of only 3 minutes. And then when you look at Lioness, it's about 7 minutes. So when you add up, their career times in the cage, their fights are averaging out to about, maybe just starting round 2. So that under 1.5 at plus money was great. At this price right now, minus 104, it's priced about as fairly as the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 215 in accordance to the benchmarks, their respective benchmarks for the division. But as you can see here, we've got the same finish rate for all 5 bets here. So I think with this one, the smartest way to play it is to take that violence like fight doesn't start round 2 or under 1.5, because that's where most of the win condition has been when these guys are finishing fights. It's happening early. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting that extra time if it's not overpriced. And in this case, it's not overpriced. So not only did I bet 1 unit on the under 1.5, but earlier we had seen on Bet Online the over 2 or the under 2.5 go to minus 275. So that would mean that the fight doesn't go to decision would probably be priced up around minus 310 to minus 325. They opened it up at minus 215. So when I see, the market already willing to push the under 2.5 to minus 275, I consider that minus 215 a gift. So what did I do, Brady? I max bet it. 5 units, minus 215. I think, though, if I'm being honest with everybody, I probably should have went lighter on the fight doesn't go to decision and went heavier on the under 1.5, because I could have won the same amount of units for less of an initial investment. But I've already got 6 units on this fight, 5 on the fight doesn't go, and 1 unit on the under 1.5 here.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're both on the same page, and I might be putting that fight doesn't go in a potential parlay as well down the roads, and might even bet it straight as well. Also, it looks like 5 Dimes has the fight doesn't go at minus 195, so I'm curious to see where everybody else opens it up at. So maybe another book will maybe mess it up, and if they do, I'll hop on as well.
Yeah, and do that, dude, because I think 5 Dimes might have even opened that at minus 175. Am I right about that?
You're right.
Wow. How nice would that have been to get minus 175 for a fight doesn't go to decision for a guy in Mike Malott who fights once every year and a half and has a 3-minute average fight time? That's beautiful.
I'd feel really good about that bet.
Yeah, and let's just hope it cashes.
Yep. As long as he doesn't go in there and William Knight it, he should be good.
Don't say those 2 words ever when somebody has an under. My God.
Exactly. All right, let us move on to the next fight on the card. We have Tatiana Suarez going against Montana De La Rosa. We have Suarez is a massive favorite. She's like minus 800. De La Rosa, big dog, plus 550. The fight goes decision, minus 150. The fight doesn't go to decision is plus 120. The over 2.5, minus 185. The under 2.5, plus 155. Weezy, what is sticking out to you on this one here?
I'm sorry. Can you? What did you say the over 2.5 was? Minus 180.
Minus 185 now.
And that's on Bet Online.
Yeah.
Under 2.5 is what?
Plus 155.
Ooh, and the fight doesn't go?
Plus 120.
And the fight goes is what, minus 150?
Yep.
All right. Okay. So we had a trifecta bet for the fight doesn't go to decision, but that was earlier when it opened at plus 150 on 5 dimes. Now it's 5% overpriced, according to the benchmark, and the fight goes is about a half percent overpriced. So they're shading just a little bit to the violence side here, but we do see that 50% of Suarez and De La Rosa's fights have finished inside the distance at the UFC level. That's 4.55% less than the implied probability of the line, and they're finishing fights at a 9.52% rate, better than what the division does at 40%, 40.48%. So, yeah, the analytics like the violence here, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, Suarez is a finisher. She's finished 3 of her 5 UFC fights, 2 of her 3 fights outside the UFC. And if you look at Montana De La Rosa, 10 of her 11 fights outside the UFC have finished inside the distance. So outside the UFC, they're finishing an 85% rate. Inside, it's 50%, but both of those numbers are higher than the implied probability of the line at 45.45%. And then you have to price in some kind of possibility that somebody like Tatiana Suarez, who hasn't fought in 3.5 years and is coming off of multiple surgeries and multiple injuries, could shoot a double leg here and just blow out her knee again, potentially. There could be a banana peel situation here, nerves. I think that everything leans not only analytics-wise, Brady, but also narrative-wise to erring on the side of violence for this fight, because we've got a long way off. There could be some things that we don't know here about Tatiana Suarez. And Montana De La Rosa's been busy. You know, she's been fighting a decent amount. She's been a lot busier than Tatiana has in the last 3.5 years. That goes without saying. So I'm leaning on the violence side for this fight.
Yep. Same here. I was thinking Suarez inside the distance, but there's like no difference between the fight doesn't go and the inside the distance for her. Like Suarez inside the distance is plus 135 and the fight doesn't go is like plus 120. So yeah, I might be hopping on that fight doesn't go to decision. I think if the Suarez we know of like 4 years ago shows up, she can absolutely get on top and either pound De La Rosa out, get a TKO, maybe find a sub. De La Rosa's been subbed before and knocked out. And then like you said, if Suarez shows up here, maybe gets hurt in the fight. Maybe she's not 100%. I think the fight doesn't go kind of covers both sides in this one. I'd be shocked if De La Rosa won a decision in this one.
That would be unbelievable against somebody like Tatiana Suarez, who just wins every goddamn minute in that cage. She never loses minutes. So, yeah, it would be really hard to see Montana figuring out a way to win 2 rounds here.
Yep. So I don't hate violence on that whatsoever. All right, especially for like a minus 800 favorite, like the fight doesn't go plus money. I mean, she's expected to run over Montana De La Rosa here.
Exactly right.
All right. So a couple more fights here, Weezy. We have the. Do you want to talk about the Cowan
event? Let's do the Sakai Mays fight. Yeah, I've got that. Okay. I've got that wrong there. So let's move that over, and now we're in the right order.
All right, we have Augusta Sakai going against Dontel Mays. We have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 plus 130. The under 2.5 rounds minus 160. The fight goes to decision plus 155. The fight doesn't go to decision is minus 190. Yeah, a lot of violence numbers stuck out on this fight to me, especially early on. They opened up the under 2.5 at plus 140. And it didn't make a ton of sense to me whatsoever. That line eventually got smashed. It looks like money's still coming on this under. And I think it's because Sakai has been finished 4 times in his last 4 fights. Sakai, I mean, everybody can see it now. Sakai does not have a ground game. Sakai does not have takedown defense. If you can take this guy down, you can get on top and you can finish him. He has nothing off his back. On the flip side, Sakai has power on the feet, knockout ability. So I would definitely lean violence here. I wouldn't play the fight doesn't go up minus 190, but that price tag does make a lot of sense to me now where it's at. Weezy, what are your thoughts on this one?
So if you look at the fight goes and the fight doesn't go, at these current prices, this is what I would call a perfectly priced line right now for those 2 props. Minus 190 for the fight doesn't go, overpriced by about 3% here according to the benchmark, overpriced by less than 2% here for the combined performances compared to the benchmark, and underpriced by 1% when you compare these 2 fighters' performance to the benchmark for the division. And then you look over here, 1.76% overpriced, 2.85% overpriced, 1% overpriced. So they're both, have got a little bit of vig in both of them. Just a touch more on the fight goes side than on the fight doesn't go side. But either way, perfectly priced lines. But what's not perfectly priced, because we've seen Sakai's fights and May's fights. 3 out of their 11 combined fights at the UFC level have finished in the last 2.5 minutes of round 3. So that's interesting, because now, when instead of a perfectly priced line here, we're seeing a line that's overpriced by 22 and 25% for the violence on the under 2.5 at minus 160. And here on the plus money side, we see a line that's basically perfectly priced in terms of the VIG being equal on both sides here. 2.34% VIG here, 2.68% VIG here, adds up to 5% VIG. Perfect VIG, that's what we want to see. So why are these underpriced by 20 and 22.5%, while these are overpriced by 25 and 22%? It's because 3 of 11, which is about 27 to 28% of their combined UFC fights, have finished in the last 2.5 minutes of round 3. So analytics-wise, Brady, it's telling us to go the over 2.5 here. Sakai is on a 4-fight losing streak. But I don't know if Mays is really a finisher at this level. And Mays is an awfully big heavyweight. I could see this being a slog that does go over. Now, at plus 140, yeah, I'm betting that under. But now it's minus 160, right? So at plus 140, we're looking at a 42% implied probability. We've got a 19% shift in implied probability here, and that's enough of a shift that could take an analytics-based bettor and just say, yeah, I'm willing to bet the overs now because A, it's plus money, and B, this 11-fight sample size here is showing a nice little advantage in terms of the implied probability of the line and the divisional over 2.5 rate. So that will be my favorite bet for this fight now that we've had that massive shift, I'm jumping on the other side and saying over 2.5 rounds at plus 130.
Yeah, fair enough. The line movement kind of shocks me, actually, but we'll see what happens on it. I'm going to ride with my under 2.5 and see what happens, but it's only beating the line movement by so much. It's only going to lead to something bad. So maybe the over does that here, WEEZY, but we can move on. We got the co-main event. We got Andre Muniz going against Brendan Allen. We got the over under set at 2.5 rounds, the over 2.5 plus 145, the under 2.5 minus 175. The fight goes decision plus 190. The fight doesn't go decision minus 230. Yep, I like violence here, but I don't really like that price.
66% of their fights in the UFC, and that's 15 of them, have finished inside the distance. And we see the line is priced 69.7, so it's just putting a little bit of vig in there. These lines make perfect sense according to their combined performances, right? 33% of their fights have went to decision, 34% is the price of the line there. So I think they really price the fight goes and the fight doesn't go really well. You're not really paying much more in either spot here for this line, for the benchmark. You can see 8.6, 7.7, 5.3. So a little bit of a shade here and a little bit of a shade in this number here as we go towards that fight goes to decision number. It's interesting, man, because if these guys don't get that quick finish, like we don't see big jumps here from the fight doesn't start round 2 to the fight goes to decision, because you see here that this should be about a 30% shift, and we see about 26% here. So this is a hard one, man. They've priced this one pretty good. They've shaded it towards the violent side, which is what you would expect when you see these guys finish rates. But just in terms of pure pricing, on DraftKings, they had the under 1.5 at plus 105. And I feel that's the best violence bet on the screen because it's priced fairly according to the under 2.5 and the fight doesn't go lines that we have on Bet Online. However, the analytics like it a lot more because these guys do get most of their finishes early in fights. So I could see Brendan Allen landing some big shots early on the feet, a big knee to hurt Muniz. And I could see Muniz getting an early takedown here and getting a submission because he's such a dangerous grappler. So I think if I'm playing one side of this, it's going to be the violent side. And I think I would have to go with that under 1.5.
Yep. 1.5 if anything, but it's probably a pass for me. But yeah, I do lean violence. All right.
And let me make one quick point, and this is why I'm saying this, Brady. We've got a 60% combined performance in 15 fights that have finished under 1.5, but overall it's only a 66% finish rate. So their rate only goes up by 6.67% when you compare it to the under 1.5, but the price of the line goes up 20%. See, so that's where we kind of use this template to find the cheaply priced lines, and that's the under 1.5 for this fight.
Yep, for sure. All right. So I was looking at they just opened up the Aliev and Alves lines. Nothing sticking out there though. All right, main event. Before we get into it, like, subscribe to the channel. We do appreciate all support here at the MMA Engine. But we have Nikita Krylov going against Ryan Spann. Very, very violent fight here. We have Bet Online opening up. The fight doesn't go decision at like minus 700 in this matchup. The fight goes to decision plus 450. The over-under set at 1.5 rounds. The over 1.5 minus 105. The under 1.5 minus 125. Money pouring in on the under 1.5 WEEZY, and I totally get why. That's a spot I'm kind of looking at. But yeah, I do like violence here quite a bit. I just don't know how I'm going to play it yet.
Yeah, so these are 3 round fights that I have loaded here, and it's a 5-round fight. But, Krylov has been scheduled for 5 much in the UFC, and neither is Spann, even though they both have before. 60%, though, of their combined 3-round fights, that's 15 of 25 have finished under 1.5 rounds. And we got a 55% line here. So a little bit of a break there. And then if you look here, this one is underpriced by 4.44% when you do the combined performance against the implied probability of the line. But this one over here, the fight doesn't go, is overpriced by 11.5%. So once again, we're finding cheaper prices in the early violence here. And let's face it, for Spann, I think it's 6 of his last 8 fights have been finishes, or maybe it's 6 of 7. And I think that 5 of those are in the first round and the other one's in the second. So this guy's fights are finishing quickly. And, with Krylov, you had a guy when he came into the UFC had literally never even seen a second round once. And then in the UFC, Krylov's fights only get to round 2 half the time. And for Spann, it's even less than half of that. So look at that. 52% of their fights don't even get to round 2. So paying just a little over 50% for an under 1.5, it just doesn't seem strange at all. And I don't picture either one of these guys pacing themselves. They don't fight that kind of style. If we look here, what their record in decisions are, let's see if either one of these guys has had any luck in decisions in their career. 2-2 for Nikita Krylov and 3-2 for Spann. So they both have won some decisions and lost them. But, Spann is getting a ton of finishes, and so is Krylov. 80% at the UFC level for Krylov and a 93% finish rate overall as a pro. So, yeah, you want to be shading violence here. I don't think you want to get real cheeky and start going over 1.5s here. Let's take a look at the 5-round analytics for under 1.5 rounds for light heavyweight fights. Under 1.5 rounds is happening about 34% of the time. So, but it should be about a plus 200 if it was priced according to the benchmark for the 5-round fights for this division. But obviously, these guys are finishing at a much higher rate than 28%, or I'm sorry, than 33%, because their under 1.5 rates are 60%, not 33%. So, yeah, I think the under 1.5 at minus 125, and I think you can get that at minus 115 on DraftKings right now, is probably the best way to play this fight.
Yeah, it was like minus 105 for a while, but it's starting to move and starting to move fast. People are starting to hop on that under. So I might be hopping on that as well, maybe after the show. But Definitely like violence. I was thinking of maybe like an alternate, like under 2.5. It looked like 5 dimes had that. It's now like minus 205. So we'll have to see what else DraftKings gets it out at. But yeah, definitely do lean violence. All right, Weezy, we got to hit a PP. We got to hit a probably parlay. Last week it was ruined due to one Zach Palga and Jordan Wright. I think we had the fight won't start round 3, and the fight started round 3. So we got to hit one. What are some legs to stick out here to you?
I mean, like if we want to get just real chalky and real basic, we can drum up something that'll hit. And here's what it is: Krylov Spann fight doesn't go to decision. Okay. Malott Lioness fight doesn't go to decision, and Trevor Peak fight doesn't go to decision. That'll probably be close to even money. And if any of those 3 go to decision, it's just one of those ones where we're like, yeah, we would apologize that the Palga Wright fight went the distance, but who out there was saying that it would? Nobody was. I mean, it almost looked like they paid Palga and they said, look, dude, if you start to hurt this guy, just clinch up with him. Because every time he would start smashing Wright with elbows in the clinch, he would clinch back up with him as if he was the one that was in danger. It was like he was trying to go the full 3 rounds, and he got there.
It was hard to watch. It was so hard to watch. But yeah, we did that parlay. I like it. I actually do like that a lot. It comes out to plus 109 for those 3. And it's going to be much better on some other books. Like Bet Online just completely minus 700 for the main event. I think it's going to be much better. Like, for example, on 5 dimes, they have the like minus 450. For that, minus 425 even for the fight as go for that main event. So I think Bet Online is just screwing people. So I think it's gonna be a much better price on a different book. But those 3 is going to be plus money.
Yeah, and I think because it's plus money, we can talk about doing that because Trevor Peak has never seen a decision in his career. Krylov has got something like 40 fights and he's been in decision once, twice in his career. And the other one, Malott Lioness. Mallott's got a 10-fight career, and that 10-fight career has lasted a grand total of 30 minutes. He fights like he's triple parked, and then he takes a year and a half off after every win.
Yeah, I'd be surprised that didn't hit, but you never know. Anything can happen. We saw the Palga Wright fight go to decision. That shocked me. The Menafield fight going decision shocked me. Hopefully there's no more shocks.
Loma Luke Boonmi not going over 2.5 rounds against Elise Reed. That one hurt us a couple weeks ago, man. I mean, like the PP has been a little bit cursed. We needed to come through this week.
Isn't that funny that 115-pound Loma Luke Boonmi can finish a fight, but not Alonzo Menafield, not Jimmy Crute, not Jordan Wright, not Zach Powell. Isn't that hilarious to think about?
Yeah, it is crazy. It's absolutely nuts.
That's why we love MMA.
That's right.
Absolutely. All right, we're about an hour in, Weezy. I think we can cut it off here. Let the people know where they can find you, your plans for the rest of the week.
Yeah, so tomorrow night I will be on the Couch Warriors show at 8 o'clock Central Time, and then 10 o'clock Central Time I'll be doing Just the Tip with Uncle Weezy. And then Wednesday night I think I'll be doing Ask Weezy this week because I don't think I have any other guest appearances for Wednesday this week. So yeah, Ask Weezy Wednesday night, and then every Sunday for Stat Diggers on Pub Sports Radio, and then you know where to find us because you're already here on the MMA Engine. So let's stack cash tickets like flapjacks on this UFC Vegas 70 card, and pray for your Uncle Weezy that this Malott fight ends under 1.5 rounds because it'll be a good week for me if it does.
Absolutely. I like your chances on that one. You guys can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers, Instagram, DFS by the numbers. I'm about to break down this Spann Krylov main event. And then tomorrow I'll be getting out my full card breakdown and prediction video, just a little bit behind this week, but almost done breaking down and taping this card. So leave a like, subscribe here to MMA Engine. Me and Weez will be back next Monday for some more probability for UFC 285 with it, which is an absolute banger. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about there. And best of luck for UFC Vegas 70. See you guys later.